My name's Taylor Rowan, and this is Confident Risks. In our first two episodes, we talked a lot about the mental side of starting, the confidence it takes, the explanation to other people, knowing when to listen to advice. Today, we're going to talk about actually starting, the first steps that it takes to start, and what are the work instructions to starting a new company. Spoiler alert, there are none. Let's get started. So the first two episodes were a lot about the mental startup of your business, thinking through the processes, starting to put the ideas out there, but it's now time to actually start, whether it's in parallel, whether it's doing it full-time on your own. That is a very scary time. And this is probably another break point for everybody, is they get started and they realize, now what? Today, we're going to kind of walk through what that startup should look like. What are some points that I have? There are no work instructions, but there are some points that I learned from that I want to share with you guys today. The best analogy that I have to start off with, for a comparison for all of you at home, you guys know I love doing this, but it's like Legos. I've got one kid who just absolutely loves Legos. My other kid, but everything would just end up all over the ground. But for the one that does love it, what's so great is we can go down the store aisle looking, okay, which Lego do we want to start doing? Oh, this is the one. We take it home, you start to do the unboxing, you notice how many bags and how many pieces are laying there, and you start to get a little bit overwhelmed. But the best part about that is when you pull out the work instructions, because the work instructions take you step by step on what you need to do to accomplish the end result. And you open the first bag and you're putting the first Legos together and maybe nothing's really coming yet, but then you get into bag maybe 2 and 3 as you're assembling and it starts taking formation. It's called having instructions, having guidance, all things that we can relate to at a lot of different points in our life. Growing up with your parents, you're told when to be somewhere, when not to be somewhere, what to do, what not to do. And you're going through that through elementary school, through high school, even into college, trade school, your first job. You're always being told what to do, how to do it, when to be somewhere, when not to be somewhere. And when you first start your new venture, it's the first time that you do not have that any longer. You're literally starting with a blank slate. And the analogy I started thinking about before was, well, you're starting with basically a big bucket of Legos of just build something. But it's not even that. It's actually just starting on a Lego table. Someone puts a Lego table down in front of you and says, build something. You start looking like, well, where are the Legos at? I don't know. You tell me. Well, where are the instructions at? I don't know. You're supposed to build them. That's the feeling you get when you first start, and it's very, very scary. That's not to deter you guys, but it was something that I didn't really grasp right away. I was working my job, kind of going back and telling you again, when I started, I was working my job, and it was time to start my new venture. And I can remember I was making more money on my side job than I was on my normal job, so I went and I talked to my boss at the time and said, hey, we're getting ready to start this new thing. I'm more than happy to work part-time. Like, no, basically, we want you to go. We need you to be completely focused on what you're doing. So I can remember the drive home, and I'm just thinking to myself, like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? Well, I sell containers. And I can remember that just being so, at the beginning, being like, oh my gosh, I don't even have an instruction guide to how to do this. I've sold a couple of these things, and I've got more sales, and I got to go to the coast. I guess I'll just take off to the coast and get another container because I had sales lined up. But it was just an extremely weird feeling because I was looking for somebody to tell me this is what's next, and I didn't have that. So with that being said, I want to lay out the 3 best points that I can give you guys on how I was able to get through those first few months, that first year even. The first one is start small. Start small. Keep your overhead low. Let's go over what overhead is. Maybe you guys know, maybe you don't know, but overhead is a terminology that you're going to hear a lot in business. Overhead is what it takes to run your business. What are the things you need in order to run your business? Maybe it's your office space, maybe it's your vehicle, and you can relate to this too at home as well, which is what does it take for you to live? What bills do you have to pay? You have your mortgage, you have your rent, your car payment, your insurance, your healthcare, all of those items. Those are all overhead items, the things that you have to have in order to move forward in life. Overhead in a business can be very minimal starting out, especially if you're starting out in parallel with the other job. You don't need the fancy stuff. This is where a lot of people can go wrong right off the bat. I can remember when I first started, I wanted to have the bare means of what I needed when I started because I didn't want to have the stress of making all of these payments, right? I had a young family at the time. I needed to start making money quick, and I did not need to have a lot of payments. So I did this by working out of my house. I didn't have a yard. I didn't have a place where I had to store all of my equipment. I did it in my driveway at the time. Made my neighbors probably really happy, but it's what I did. I didn't have the fancy cars. I didn't have all of the equipment that I necessarily needed right off the bat. All I had were the things that I absolutely had to have in order to make my business go forward. None of the extra stuff. And that can sometimes be very hard because when you first start out, you're starting a new venture. Maybe some people doubted you at the beginning and you want to show a lot of times your success. All of us do it. You know, whether you're making money now or a job that you're in and you want to have the nicest stuff, which, okay, if you're making it and you have a job and you have the means to do it, fantastic. But at the beginning, the number one thing is to not go underwater as a business. You want to make sure that you can meet all of your payments. Keep it small. Keep your overhead low. I want to make this point though. At some point, you do need to start spending money. And a great example of this that I found out is when I was driving back and forth to the coast at the very beginning. I was driving this old beat up truck at the time. You know, it was 2005. It had a lot of miles on it, and I can remember I was the third or fourth trip in, and it broke down on me. And I took it into the shop, had some repairs done, cost me almost $1,500 to get it fixed, and it really ate away at the profit that I made on those first two deliveries. A couple more trips in, something else happens. And then I had to pay for tires, and all of these things start adding up, and it's basically eating into my profit. At that point, I realized that if I were to purchase a new truck, one that had a set payment each month, not these sporadic payments here, but a set payment each month, it wasn't going to give me downtime, knock on wood. I was going to be able to get there and back and do more trips, and I was able to do it faster. I was able to do it more efficiently. I was able to get stuff dropped off, and I wasn't worried about the downtime I was going to have. At that point, that's when you know you can make a smart decision and add to your overhead. Invest in something that's going to help you do your job better. Some people may argue that that's not an overhead expense. At the same time, I totally see it that way. It's something that you have to have in order to run your business, and you're able to do it at a much higher level by having that piece of equipment. Point number 2, don't try to be like somebody else. Do not try to be like somebody else. I've seen this happen before, even people that I've worked for in the past, is I've used to hear the terms all the time, well, my dad wouldn't have done it this way, or the previous person in this position wouldn't have done it this way. Who cares about the previous person and how they did it? You're in this position now because it is your position to have, whether that's in a new company or whether that's starting something new. This is now your time. It is your baby. You have to take ownership of what you're doing. Trying to imitate somebody else means that you're trying to follow exactly what that person did. Now, that doesn't mean you can't use other people as examples or people that you look up to, or, oh, this person did something really good. I want to try being like that person. It's not the same thing. When you try answering questions or running something like you think somebody else would do it, you now have extremely weak footings on your building. You're now not thinking through the process like you would think through it. You're trying to think through it how somebody else would do it, and it's never going to work out. You are now the driver of your own ship. You have to do it the way you think it should be done and be confident in how you think it should be done. Even if right off the bat, it's not the most successful, at least you learned from what you did wrong. You know that your thought process maybe wasn't the best thought process at the beginning, which is going to happen, but at least you learned from that mistake. The best example I can think here is that when I was selling containers, I would sell 2 different grades. I would sell a new one-trip container, one trip meaning that it took one trip from China to here, and then I would sell it. So it was a new box. The second condition would be a used condition. It was one that had been on the shipping lines for a long time. It had gone back and forth many trips from China to here or from wherever else to here. And there's a lot of dents and rust and other markings on these containers, sometimes graffiti. But it was a way for people to keep their goods dry. Well, I thought it would be great to offer also a third solution, which was just an absolute dog crap box, one that was very, very cheap. They could lock stuff up in it, but at the same time, aesthetically, it just was not pretty. Well, I was able to supply these boxes really cheap at the beginning, but at the same time, I got more and more callbacks because I really didn't put on the description, hey, this box could leak, this box could do this. It was mainly just a price point, but that was something that I learned from. And by learning that, I know now moving forward with other areas of the decision making I'm going to make at the company, they can relate to that. Those are other areas that I'm moving forward with that I can go back to that same scenario and teach other people and say, look, here was my idea. It did not work out. Now, I want to be clear on this. Fake it till you make it is not the same as trying to imitate somebody else. And I bring that up because that was brought up to me in the past. Fake it till you make it is something I am a huge believer of. And I've got stories more than what I could tell on this podcast of times that I did that. But the main one I can think of was when we first started, I didn't want customers coming to our business and thinking that we were smaller than what we really were, which we were small at the time. It was just my wife and I. So I can remember telling my wife at the time, like, hey, you need to change your email address so it's your maiden name and not us having the same last name going back and forth. And then I started going down the road of, well, now we need to have an HR department. We need to have a sales department. Maybe we need to have a media department. So I would make these email accounts that made it look like we had more employees than we actually did. But it worked out great because now when I was talking to either fire departments or sales of containers and people had specific questions that I know that I could answer, maybe it was my engineer who was answering them, who was a third party, but I was able to use the email addresses on CC, on carbon copy on those emails where it made it look like we were bigger than we were. And this is a great transition to point number 3. Focus on your customer. At the very beginning, the number one thing that you can do is focus on your customer. It goes right with the first 2 points that I talked about. But focusing on your customer at the end of the day is your biggest salesperson. When you deliver a product or you do something for a customer, that person is going to talk to other people. And at the very beginning, when I was bringing containers back, my margins were good. I was able to focus on my customer more. So if I had a leak or I had something happening with a container, I was able to service that customer because my overhead was so low, my margins were pretty good, that I was able to then spend that money that I could have probably been spending on overhead on making sure that the item that my customer got was absolutely exactly what I said it would be. And that word got out there. I was selling containers all over the Liberty Lake, Spokane, even into Idaho, Montana, all the way down into Oregon. I was selling containers everywhere because it got around to different people. If you need a container, this person is going to go above and beyond. And that goes for, we've probably had thousands of customers in the fire industry and selling containers, renting containers. There are probably 1, maybe 2 customers that I can think of that were unhappy at the end of the day. You will never go wrong when you spend time and money on your customer. You don't need the flashy stuff. You don't need the items that you think people want to see. At the end of the day, people want to know that you're taking care of them. And I can think back to my parents, for instance. They always had, in that generation, they always had quality items that were built right. And back to our grandparents' age, even more, things were built the right way. Today, quality is taking a very big hit. And there's a lot of other stories I can say on that front as well. Quality is going downhill. The number one thing that I tell all of our employees is quality. We need to focus on quality. When our customer gets our item, when they get our product, they need to look at this product and say, man, these guys paid a lot of attention to detail. And that goes a very long way, especially when your customer is your biggest salesperson. So to recap these 3 points, number 1, start small. You don't need the fancy stuff. What you need is you need to start making a profit. You want that company working for you, okay? You do not want to be enslaved to that company. Start small. Point number 2, don't try to be like somebody else. Don't try to make decisions based on what you think somebody else would do. Yes, you can have role models. Yes, you can have people that you can look up to, but don't try to be like somebody else. This is the time where you get to be your own person. Trust in yourself. You've done the research. You know the product. Trust in yourself to make those decisions. Point number 3, focus on your customer. Your customer is your best salesperson. If you treat your customer correctly, they will then in return talk to everybody else. That's been the same thing since I started the company all the way till now. I have fire departments all over the country who talk to other fire departments. They're like sorority girls. They literally talk to everybody. The same thing happened at the very beginning when I was selling containers. Customers talk to other customers. Make sure that your focus is on that customer, making sure that the product that you're building is the absolute best product. And at the very beginning, that's what you need to be focusing most on, especially if you have low overhead, is in parallel to starting your business, you need to also be working on how can I do this better? How can I make this product better? How can I make my customer happy? Focusing on your customer will always be the right choice. In closing, the startup of a company is scary. Starting something new is always scary. But at the end of the day, you need to enjoy that time. I think back myself when I first started in those times where my wife and I are sitting there trying to figure things out and how can we do this better? It's a scary time, but it's also extremely rewarding, especially if that overhead is a little bit lower. Make sure that you're focusing on the right items. Make sure that the groundwork that you're putting into place are items and things that people behind you and that come up behind you and start working for you one day are able to follow. Simplify it. Keep it simple. It doesn't need to be complicated. Hopefully you were able to take something from today's episode and apply it to your everyday life. I absolutely love doing this and I can't wait to put more content out for you guys. Until then, if you haven't already, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, follow us on social media, and until next time, stay sharp and stay resilient.